welcome everybody. Sorry it's taken us a little while to sort of get that organised. We're learning about webinars as we go along today. So thank you very much for everybody for attending. QCAL and ACAL extend you a very warm welcome to this webinar. And we're really thrilled at the number of people who are interested in attending the webinar and finding out about the resource as well. My thanks to QCAL and Anne Kelly for organising the webinar, along with ACAL's Anna and Don, who've done a lot of the technical work behind the scenes. Also thanks to VALBEC for publishing the resource that we're looking at today. So if you're not sure who ACAL and VALBEC are and what they do, at the end of the screens today you'll be able to see some links to those organisations and find out what they do. Given the large number of people that are registered to attend this webinar, it won't be possible for you to interact verbally. However, we really value your questions, and I and Anna will be having a look at the chat and just making sure that everybody are, picking up any questions or comments. Because there are so many people, if you could just keep your comments really concise and relevant to the topic from now on, that would be really great. If you haven't got any sound, if you've logged in through the webinar sound, just look at the chat box. There is a little number there that you can see that tells you to call that number. There's also a technical number you can call if you're having help. So you need to log in through your computer, but you also need to call on your phone. So the phone number is in the chat box down the side or on the email that you received as well. So hopefully we can sort those technical difficulties out for some people who've still got no sound in the next little while. When I was a beginning adult literacy teacher, strength in numbers, mathematics, a new beginning, breaking the maths barrier, numeracy and the line were all resources that were really useful for me and very practical for me in my early teaching practice. Beth Ma has been instrumental in developing these and other adult literacy numeracy resources over the years. She's also taken her numeracy teaching overseas to places like Timor-Leste and has conducted many workshops at state councils for adult literacy and ACAL conferences and forums. So I'll pass over to Beth now, and I hope that everybody finds this really useful. Throughout the time, we're actually going to be doing some surveys. Actually, I forgot to do that, sorry, before I hand over to Beth. So Anna, if we can just do some polls to start with. We want to find out which state you're joining from. So throughout the webinar we'll do these little polls. We just need you to really quickly click on and give us an answer. And as you can see, we'll be able to see that a lot of people from Queensland are joining us. We've got people from Victoria, Tas, New South Wales. We've got one person maybe from the ACT, and one from the Northern Territory as well. So welcome everybody. Thanks Anna, we'll shut that one.
Okay, yep.
And we have another poll about where you're located geographically, not in terms of your state. And Anna will just bring that up now. And we'll do that throughout the workshop so that we can just have an idea of where you're all coming from. We've got lots of people in capital cities and large regional cities. We've got one in a remote location. I would have thought we'd had more than that. I saw there was a crowd from Udamindy and small town. Beautiful. Thank you. And I think we've got one more poll, which is how long have you been teaching numeracy? Right, so a real mix of experience there, but we have got quite a few people who are very experienced and have been teaching more than 15 years. So every now and then throughout the webinar, we'll stop and have some polls about some of the content, and we'll be able to get reports about that, and we'll do a survey at the end of the webinar as well. So I'll hand over to Beth now.
Hi, welcome everybody. Today I just want to look through some of the aspects of building strength with numeracy, some of its features and some of the principles behind it. So it's sort of the why behind the what is there. Now usually I do this in interactive workshops, and because I think nothing beats the experience of having a go at things yourself and talking to other teachers. But this is a webinar and experiment, and we're trying to convey the ideas, so we'll see how we go. And hopefully it's the beginning of a conversation. If it's successful, we can do more. And we'll be seeking your input every now and again through the webinar, partly to see if you're still there and awake, and partly because, well, mostly because I really want to know what you're thinking. Okay, I'll get started now. All of a sudden these aren't going up as I, okay. Now, building strength with numeracy is a teacher resource which we developed or I worked on about a year ago. It's there online for you. It's free to download. You can either use that address for the VALBEC website, or all you have to do is really put VALBEC into Google and up it will come. The reason we did it was that I got a phone call one day to say, do you realise that strength in numbers is over 20 years old? Which made me feel old too, I tell you. Anyway, strength in numbers, as Jenny said, is one of our old favourites, and they were getting a bit out of date and they were hard to get because government funding's dried up for people that distribute those things. So we decided that we would revise it. So we put a lot of stuff that was there before, all the old favourites, and a lot of new practice sheets as well, and everything is updated, so the prices are no longer 25 years old. Also, because I have been doing a lot more teaching recently, I've got a whole lot of newly developed activities which I've put into the resource. It's at the moment got 5 sections, as you can see. 3 of them are fairly obvious what's in them. Getting started and exploring numbers, I'll talk a little bit today. And at the moment, I'm working on new sections on decimals and measurement. In each section is a collection of activities, and I want to discuss the rationale for some of those and for some of the sections themselves and the particular types of activities that I've chosen. So everything that you could possibly think of is not there. There are reasons for what is there and things that are not so available in other resources. So I want to start out talking about the getting started section. There's 2 senses to this getting started. One is activities to get your whole course started when you've got a new group of students, and one is activities to get the individual sessions started. And before I do that, I want you to reflect for a few moments. So we're going to do a little think. Just look at these sentences and think of the first thing that comes into your head. I'll give you a minute to think about that. Okay, now we're going to go through this bit by bit. I just want you to give quick responses. Don't agonise over what you're going to say. We're going to put them up one question at a time and just tick what's the closest to your response. The second one, you can do multiples.
Sounds like we've got a lot of people, Beth, who are either very positive or very negative.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Although there's a little bit negative going on fair whack there. Okay, the next one. Yep. That was our experiences of maths at school. Now, most of my maths teachers were interesting when I do this. Yeah, boring's getting a bit of a rating there. Good, memorable, that's good. A lot of that not easy to understand comes up when I do this with a group of people, and that feeling that a lot of teachers were only interested in the bright students as well. Have we got another one there, Ellen?
Yep.
Okay.
Looks like we've all overcome our fear of maths.
It does, doesn't it? That's
some of us are still anxious. Yeah.
The people that are not so anxious that they can't get into the chat site and everything are feeling okay about maths. And when I have to think about anxiety, I just think about using this technology and I feel it already. Now, what happens usually when I ask a group of non-maths teachers, but literacy-trained teachers, questions like this, I get quite a mixed reaction of all the horror stories that they had at school and the reason why they didn't choose maths as a career, I suppose. And what's happened over the past is there's been quite a lot of research done to find out that a lot of students suffer from what we call maths anxiety. I wanted to start by you thinking about how you felt about maths and then to think about how your students feel about maths, which is not usually quite so positive. Sheila Tobias was one of the first persons to write about that, and you can see how she described it there. Not only does it anxiety make you feel all these symptoms that I've got up there, headaches and nausea, panic, avoidance of classes, it also makes you forget things and it makes you unable to think clearly. And so what you should make sure that you're realising with your students is when they first come to you, they're probably feeling a great deal of that anxiety, and it should always be uppermost in their mind. I had someone walk out of a first class once with a migraine attack, and it wasn't not easy even when people get themselves to classes. They are unable to get their thoughts together. They're unable to get rid of this feeling of panic. And a lot of teachers that I do PD with have had to force themselves to get there, force themselves to overcome the headaches or the sick feeling in their stomach before they arrived at the session. They're always glad afterwards, but that fear is there, and it's quite common both with literacy teachers trying to teach numeracy and the numeracy students themselves. And when we're talking about the students, a lot of people will give us these 4 things that were common causes of why they felt anxious about maths. And for me, it was the mental arithmetic speed test, but for other people, it was fractions or long division or algebra.
For me, it was long division, Beth. When I was in primary school, I was sick when the class learned how to do long division. And when I came back, the teacher told me I'd be fine without any help to catch up. So that really small incident, from the teacher's point of view, really impacted on my maths fear forever after. So I'm also, it was nervous until I got some really good mentors who taught me some more things about numeracy. It helped me to relax a bit more.
Yeah. And once that thing happens, it starts at fractions or it starts at long division. Somehow people never catch up and they always feel like they're running behind and they give up a lot.
And I'm really conscious that as teachers, those small remarks can have a big impact. And given that we know that improving numeracy skills has a really big impact on people's lives, as teachers, if we avoid teaching numeracy, we're doing people a real disservice. So it's good to get really comfortable with it.
The funny thing for me is that there's different levels of maths for different people. People say, oh, I hate maths, oh, I can't do maths. But when you actually talk to them, you find out some people are actually talking about grade 5 at school, and some people are talking about like year 11 or year 12 and when they bummed out of calculus. They're all talking about different things. And it's really interesting to me because if you're a maths teacher, you always get to hear what people think about maths. They always tell you whether they liked it or they loved it or they were anxious, but mostly they just step back a pace and go, oh, maths made me really scared at school. So this idea that we're talking about the same thing is really wrong. And there's this thing I realised when I was reading about workplace maths and doing some research in the workplace. It's called invisible numeracy. People think that what they cannot do, that's where real maths begins. Everything else they take for granted. Everything that they do every day, all their shopping, all their calculations of how much money they know they need and what time to catch the bus and all of that, not thought of as maths. They're just the things I can do. What's maths is what I can't do. And this is so common, even with myself, because statistics is what always my bugbear. That's what real mathematicians can do. They can do statistics. Oh no. My screen's just gone funny again.
Shall we go? Do you want me to go to the next slide?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I'm having a technical difficulty. I'm having great anxiety of technology and somebody else's computer. I'm using somebody else's computer because my camera's not working on mine. So what we are seeing in this maths anxiety is often caused because when maths stopped having meaning at school and people just felt like they were jumping through hoops and they didn't know why. Next screen, please. Yep. This cartoon typifies what I'm talking about. This is the old adage. I don't know if you remember the old thing about how do you divide by fractions? You turn it upside down and multiply. Well, nobody ever knew why they turned it upside down and multiplied, but they did. And this is sort of like you just do what you're told. It doesn't have to make sense. Now, the maths that we know at school was traditionally taught. It was silent, competitive, meaningless, and abstract for a lot of people. Look, I love it. I love the game of mathematics, but a lot of people don't. And if they're in numeracy classes, it probably means they didn't either. So what we need to do when we've got people coming to adult numeracy classes is change it completely so that it's not those things. Sorry, I actually can't see what's happening on my screen. I'm going to call for help if I'm here in a minute, but I'm going to keep talking at the same time.
Shall we take up a quick poll, Beth?
Yeah, while I try and sort my screen out, that would be good.
Okay, yep. Just go.
Patty, can you come and help me, please? No, we're not. Yeah. Yep. Okay, thank you. You'll be very happy to know that I can see the screen again. And there's a good spread of levels there, a lot of level 1 and 2, which is pretty expected, and a few people with even higher levels. Okay. Numeracy teaching should be different from maths, and I can see where I am, so I'll be doing this better now. What we need to try and do is to change the methods. And so what this resource that I'm talking about is trying to do is give you some alternative methods, especially ones that get people cooperating with each other and interacting and discussing about the ideas.
Beth, can you just move a little closer to your microphone?
I'm wearing my microphone. I'm going to get
me there. That's better, thank you.
Okay, I'll just have to hold it. Okay. Now, in the getting started section, there's a lot of activities to get the class started, to get people feeling comfortable being there and trying to get rid of their maths anxieties that they may bring, and also try and start as a social group. So getting them talking and not just sitting there, not interacting with each other. And I always start with any group of people, including groups of teachers who are coming together for the first time. I always start with something like this. If your students can't write, then you just do it verbally. You have a discussion that gets them starting to talk about their feelings. And the I'm good at is there particularly so that we can get away from this everything I can't do is maths and get people to start focusing on their strengths as well as their weaknesses and their positive. So even if it takes you a while for them to find something that they're good at, by suggesting that, they can use money, all those things, these are the things we want to know. And I always use that with a group of students, and I always get them to try and share their experiences, because some of them are real horror stories and we need to get them out there so we understand where our students are coming from. Okay, as I just said, so I don't need to go on about that. But yes, and the last point there was it lets you find out about the learners as well as them finding about each other. Another one that is there to get the class moving and get things going is a thing that I've called moving numbers, which is basically number puzzles. One of the pictures is up there at the moment. And you can see that the way these are done is that we've got cut-out numbers that people can move around so that you don't have to put pen to paper. And I encourage them to work together in pairs to do these, and they can push the numbers around until they get them up. There's a lot of anxiety involved in making a commitment to an answer, but if you can move things around, then that helps. There's another example of that with all the pieces cut out and less threatening on paper and pencil. There's several of those. Those people who were in a professional development, but I had set it up as problem-solving stations. And that's where you have a whole lot of people with a whole lot of stations around the room, different places, and the people in pairs move around from station to station. Sorry about that. And this is really good because people just get in, and sometimes four of them will get together and exchange ideas about the product. They can move around at will, and it's just a good way to get the ball rolling in one of your first sessions. Other things in getting started section are things like quick questions and 10 questions, which are sort of focus questions to get the class moving, to get everybody's pens out of their bag and settle down and into the idea of they're here to get the maths done. And another one is the game multi-digit, which some of you will recognise as out of strength in numbers. It's a game of luck and skill played with a 10-sided dice. You can use a 6-sided dice if you can't get hold of a 10-sided dice from a game shop. It's as you roll the dice, students have to elect where to put the numbers, and they're trying to get the biggest total that they can, but they have to commit themselves. So there's a lot of probability going on there about what might roll next.
I've used that a lot, Beth, and it's really good to get people adding in something that's really non-threatening. It's much better than those dreadful sheets of sums that we used to do at school, and which I wouldn't use in an adult learning context. People really find they can voice their concerns because it's all a game, and they're not stressed out about adding because they're having fun having a game. And it is really good to take away all those place value issues as well.
Yeah, and as you say, it's a game that students enjoy, and it really gives you a chance. And they want to play it over and over again. You have to say, no, that's enough for the day. We'll do it again tomorrow. But it's really good to you if you can walk around the room as we're doing it. You can see how familiar they are with place value, and also they get a lot of addition practice.
And
I
you
always
can suss out who needs to use a calculator and who can do it themselves, and gradually move them from a calculator onto doing it themselves, which is really useful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always get them to say their numbers out and speak them, because then we get into that rhythm of saying 5,672, that sort of thing, which is great for people for whom English is not the first language, and also quite valuable for people who do speak English. We were going to have a poll here, but my mind's gone blank after all that technical difficulty, Anna.
Okay, yep. Let's do one of our polls. Just about accessing the resource online.
Yes, that's correct. Mm-hmm.
So some people are already using it, and some people
Oh,
are
that's
just
good.
beginning
Yes.
to look.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So I hope I'm not just talking to the converted at the moment, but never mind. What I really want to talk about today is the reason that a lot of the activities I've put in there are there, and they're the ones that are designed to promote interaction, discussion, especially in pairs and small groups. I've put them in every section of the resource, and there's a lot of reasons for this, and it's partly about anxiety issues, but it's also about learning issues, cognitive issues, and social or cultural issues in the class. I don't mean social in the having a party, but the interacting. The cognitive reasons, discussion gets students exploring their ideas together, gets them actually thinking things aloud, therefore formulating their thoughts better. It also gets them using maths-related language, and they will try tasks that are more difficult if they've got somebody else to work with than if they're trying to do it themselves, which is much more likely to just shrug and give up. The social reasons are you get a better atmosphere going in the class. People don't feel so anxious if they're starting to do something with somebody else. And it also changes the expectation of it being silent. We're not allowed to talk here. Maths is serious stuff. Also, it encourages interaction between groups of students. So if you've got groups of different people from different cultures in your class, mixing them around in group work is really useful. In fact, it was interesting to me to read that it started when they were integrating black students into schools in the USA. I'm just seeing some comments about downloading on the chat box. You may want to get some help at some stage downloading. When you press on the content page, you go into the content and you can click on those things and it'll come on your screen and you can print them off or you can save them. So the people that think they didn't have a downloading option, I hope that helps. Maybe Don can talk to you more about that later. So where was I? Interacting between groups of students in school. Yes, I was actually researching a class and found that there were 3 distinct groups in that class. There were the Ocker mothers, who were there for all sorts of different reasons. There was a whole group of long-time migrants who'd worked in factories and lost their jobs, and there were some miscellaneous other males in the class. And when they had to work together in groups, it really got them talking to each other a lot better than before. Also, there were a couple of isolated students in that group, and they would just walk into the room and sit at the back and never talk to anyone. After they'd been doing group work for a while, I found that they stopped doing that and they actually started interacting, exchanging information about each other, and even when they weren't doing group activities after that, they would help each other. So it really broke down the sort of tendency to isolate. In that case, one of them was an older Muslim man, and one of them was a youth school dropout who hadn't got on well with the school and had to leave. And they ended up, interacting with each other and talking to each other and helping each other with math problems later on. Now, the thing about interaction is that it doesn't just happen, and it usually needs activities that are specifically designed for pairs and small groups. And I find that these often rely on movable pieces in the centre rather than pencil and paper. If you have a pencil and paper, one person grabs it and the rest of the people are left out. And we used those movable pieces with the problem solving before, but I tend to design activities so that they've got something in the centre of the table that everyone can interact. You can see the hands moving there and everybody engaged in that activity because they're moving the cards around. What they were doing is a thing out of exploring numbers, which is called keywords for calculations. It was in Numeracy on the line before, and it started exploring all the different ways we say plus, minus, multiply and divide, and all the different words that we use for them. And it's particularly helpful if you've got people whose English is a second language, but it's also good for us to think about all the different ways that we say it. So we can also invite students to put the words they use in their own language as well as the ones that are there as options. So you can see people interacting with that because they're moving a piece of their own. Now, another type that I use a lot, and partly because I was so successful in Timor-Leste, I decided that, these are good. They're a typical structure of matching or sorting pieces, and they, again, rely on the pieces in the centre of the table, which encourages everybody to share. And because all the answers there, it stops people getting anxious that they're going to have to come up with the answers. They just have to find the ones that are there. Now, the most simple of those is one where you've got one-to-one matching. So in that one, I'll just give you a second to have a look at it. We're matching those descriptions with those percentages. I just saw on the thing, can we get a link to resources? Yes, we will send everybody an email with specific instructions, or somebody else has put it up there anyway, but yeah. Now, this one is a one-to-one match. So you can start with the easiest ones, and then as you go on, the ones you weren't so sure about will become more apparent to you, and you might be left with one you didn't know about. You're going to get the answer. But in the meantime, you will have all talked to each other about it and exchanged information. That one is matching percentages too, and it's from the percentage section. And as I said, it's the simplest form of matching. One thing matches with another. Yep. Now, I really like matching activities, and you can create a million of them, and you can get a bit carried away. Yes, you have to cut them up at first, but you can save them. If you've got laminating equipment, that's really good. If you don't, you can put them on cardboard, but put them in an envelope. Yes, it takes a while the first time, but you use them over and over and over again. Okay, before we do this next one, I'm going to go back and I'm going to get Anna to give you a quick poll on who might use that with their students.
So we've got 3 questions. The first is this one.
Okay, a few people will probably not, but most of you would. Great. Next question.
Okay.
The next question is a bit more about why we would use it, I think. You're having a problem there, Anna?
It's coming. There we go.
Okay. Okay, so for people teaching at high level, too easy, and for people at the really low level, a bit hard. If it's too easy, it's often a really good quick revision, by the way, just to get them warmed up and make sure that they do know those things. But yeah.
Okay.
If it's too hard also, Beth, is it about the language as well?
Some people mightn't have been exposed to percentages at all. Look, an interesting thing that you can also do with this, if it isn't easy, it's a good way to get students mixing around, is you give people one card each and get them to go and find their match. It's a really good way of shuffling people around the room, and you can then get them to work together for a little while. It's sort of active students, or to get them moving up out of their seats. It's a good way to do a simple matching. Don't take this down yet. I have to have a look. I could use it. Yeah, observing existing knowledge before teaching is a really good reason to use things, even if you think they are a little bit easy. And it's a good way to introduce the topic. Start with what you know. And yeah, good revision. And good to see if your students are learning something. Okay. I'm going to move on, okay? Now the next one is another sort of matching and sorting activity, and it's from the fractions section called Matching Common Fractions. And this one's more of sorting because there's groups of things and not a single one-to-one thing. And just let you have a little bit of a look at that. As you can see, we've got pictorial representations, we've got words, we've got fractions. And students have to put them together in groups. Now, when they do put them together in groups, they'll find these two stray fractions that didn't actually fit with any others. Now, if you can see those properly, I want you to think about why I would have chosen those ones as the outliers for a minute. In the suggested procedures of this activity, so it describes how to extend them. So you've got everybody matching and you've spent ages cutting up the cards. So you really don't want it to be over in 2 minutes, believe me. And this has happened to me over a period of years that I've worked out what to do. The blank cards then encourage them to extend themselves, and they can challenge the quicker groups. And you can choose to use them or not. If the students are struggling already, you don't use them. If the students weren't struggling and they could put them together, then okay, let's look at these two cards. I'll give you some blank pieces to put with them. Why don't you make up some other cards that will go with them so that they're not outliers anymore? They've got a group. Now, this is when students actually go back, really closely look at the other ones and think about the meaning so that they have to create their own. So it's a really good extension. I find this is really helpful, and I developed this over years of thinking, oh, well, yes, that was quick. They did put those things together quickly, but do they really understand? Now, the reason I've chosen those particular fractions, one is there's a fifth there, and they've got to come up with an alternative shape to make a fifth. So they really have to think how they're going to divide this shape into 5 equal pieces. So it really brings home the meaning of a fifth. And the other one is 3/8. So you're going to have to count those things and think about, oh yeah, I have to have 3 out of 8 in whatever section. So I've chosen ones where they're going to have to think about their fractions as they do them. And as a lot of you have already said, I think that matching and sorting activities allow you to observe what students know already while they're working together. And this is really important principle of adult learning. Start with their existing knowledge. So if you use these things quite early in the piece, you can see what's going on. You can see how much they know. And you can build on that. And as most numeracy teachers know, that's not really easy to find out before the classes start, because the literacy intake usually concentrates on the literacy levels, and you don't want to start testing them because that makes them anxious. And we're looking for what they can do, not what they can't do. So observation of group work like this is really helpful, I find. When you're trying to observe, if the best thing that you can do is encourage students to explain their thinking to each other and tell them that they all should be able to explain why the cards are there, and ask questions like this: can you explain to me? Are there any others? Which is the easiest, just to get you interacting with the class. And making records is a really good idea. Not that it's that easy, but there are a lot of suggestions in the book Rethinking Assessment, which we can send you information about later. Okay, the next example is a matching and sorting activity, and I'm just looking at the time. So we were going to ask you about whether you thought you would use that other one, and yes, we will. So,
Okay.
I'm going back so you're reminded. How many of you think you would use that one?
Okay.
Okay.
Most people are going to use that one, Beth.
Pardon?
Most people are going to use that one.
They are. Okay. We'll move on to the next one. Not the next poll. Oh, yes.
Oh.
I'm just going back to the next activity. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, when you can take that down, that'll be good, and we'll go on to look at the, this is also from the fractions section, and it's sorting fractions of something. Now, we all get very carried away with the idea of cutting the apple and seeing fractions of a whole, but sometimes we forget that most of the fractions we use in everyday life are connected to numbers, like half a dollar, which is 50 cents, and half of a metre, which is 550 centimetres, those sorts of things. So this one is starting to look at things with numbers attached to it. So it's that other sort of fractions. And this time we get people to sort the things into a template so that they're looking at realistic quantities. I'll get you a more detailed picture of those now, just so you can see what the board looks like. So we've got time, money, measurement, different sorts of time, weight, all of those things. And again, the possibility for a lot of extensions, open-ended possibilities. You could get them to make 1 or 2 cards for each set because none of the sets are quite complete, or you can get them to do a whole set of months as fractions of a year, minutes as fractions of an hour, grams as part of a kilogram. So it's taking what's there and extending it a little bit more. I also use it for a teaching moment about how do we find half of those things or a quarter, and relate it to division by actually sharing things out and using the language of sharing and dividing at the same time. It's very clearly explained in the procedures of the activity, so I won't go on about it now. Okay.
We might not have time for this.
No, and we've done it anyway. All right. The other thing I want to talk to you about is estimation, and also want to talk to you about the structures of the activities. So I'm going to do that really quickly. For me, estimation is really important, and I was going to ask you your opinions about it, but we're running out of time. I'm going to use the activity called Estimate or Accurate, which is in the Exploring Numbers section, and I'm going to use that to show you how I've structured the activities in the resource. So the first component is the overview, and that's what you're going to see when you go to the contents page of the website. And it briefly tells you what's in the activity and why you might want to use it. So, for example, with estimate and accurate, this is what it looks like. I'm using this one because I think it's one of the most difficult things to teach, and other people have said too, that it's really hard to get students to understand about estimation. So this is one of my attempts. Okay, so we've had the overview, and then it gives you the skills and knowledge that you can expect to be building in that, in this case, the language of estimation. It tells you what sort of materials you're going to need, which activity sheets to photocopy and how many of them, and other things that you should do to get yourself ready for the activity. And then there's a suggested procedure, which is most of what the activity is. And it's quite detailed, possibly because I'm very wordy, but possibly because it's meant as a conversation between me and you. And I don't want to just say, do this, do that. It's about why you do this and suggestions that you might want to do this, or you might want to do it differently. I'm saying this because when I went up to Timor and I was writing these for Timorese teachers, I found myself cutting them right back because they just wanted people to tell them what to do, because they're trying to learn the maths at the same time as teaching them. But to hear, I know that Australians don't like being told what to do, and they really like to feel like they have options. So I've tried to write this in a way that's saying, well, this is the way I'm suggesting you do it. You may choose to, or you may not. So if it gets wordy, I wouldn't mind the feedback if that's not a good idea. So an example of a suggested procedure is like this. This is an example that you might want to give to your students so that you can begin to talk about the estimation. Okay, so we've got the suggested procedure, we've got why you want to do it, this is how you might want to do it, and then at the end there's lots of practice sheets for students. A lot of the old ones have been revised and revitalised and look different, but I've put in lots and lots of new practice sheets as well. Because although I advocate interaction and people working together, you don't want them working together all the time, and everybody needs some respite when they're working by themselves as well. You cannot keep up meaningful discussions for a whole hour even. So one of the activities, this is part of one of the worksheets, is starting to get the idea of the language associated with estimation and all the sorts of different terms we use. And then having a discussion about when you would use estimation. When is it good enough to estimate? When is it good enough for, when is it not good enough, and when do you need an accurate time? Some of those are a bit ambiguous, and that's good because students are going to have to talk it out and argue, and they're going to learn from that. And of course, the more practical things of, can I afford to buy it? If I've got this much money, can I afford to buy these? And that's building the skills of estimation. Now, I'm writing a whole lot more of these at the moment for the decimal session. We're working with money, so lots of those things are going to be in the new section. But that was one I just felt I had to put in when I was doing the resource initially. Okay, now the rest of it is extension activities and ideas for follow-up, like after you've done the worksheets. On that one we were talking about is probably what to use your catalogues, and say perhaps if you had a $50 voucher, what could you buy from this catalogue, that sort of thing. So there's links and links between the activities in the resource, saying it'd be good to follow with that. Okay, I've said nearly all I want to say at the moment, and we want to give you an exit poll apologise for my voice wavering some of the time, but it's an experiment. It's a bit nerve-wracking.
Thanks, Beth. I think this is Beth's first webinar as well as ACAL's first webinar. So thank you.
Certainly is.
Yep. So I think we've done very well, Beth.
It's
so
very disconcerting talking to people you can't see, I have to say.
That's all right. I'm sure we'll practice as we go along and get.
We will.
Yeah. So because we would like to know, if this webinar has been useful, we've obviously given you a bit of a taster about the numeracy resource. I'm sure some of you are familiar with in the old versions, and so hopefully we're encouraging you to use the new version, and for those of you who are not familiar with those versions, hopefully we're introducing them to you. We'd also like to know about how you found the process of the webinar, because as I said, it is our first webinar, so we would like you to just add your feedback onto the survey that's here as well. So how informative was the webinar? Has this webinar been useful to you? Are you likely to use this resource for your students? And what would make it easier for you to participate in future webinars? There's also a couple of open text boxes there for you to add in some comments about what topics would be most useful for future webinars and any other comments about the webinar and how it's worked for you. So we'd really appreciate you completing that survey and submitting it. Okay. Beth, it's saying closing comments. Did you have something else to add there? No?
I don't think so. I really would welcome people's feedback and any questions that they have about the resource. And we'll be sending you out a little bit of information at the end of this about one or two things that I can't remember, but we will be. Anyway, I'll send my email on it. If people have got particular questions, they can email them to me.
Okay. And I've seen a comment from Marilyn about sound being on the internet. We did consider that. We can do it VoIP as well, but we just were conscious of people in remote areas might have some difficulty with that. But certainly, yeah, please fill in the survey. Has everybody got that in front of the screen, Anna?
Yes, they have. Yep.
Yep, and just submit that. Thank you very much for everybody for attending. We've had about 90 people, so it's been great. So thanks everybody very much. We really appreciate it. So on behalf of QCAL and ACAL, thank you and goodbye.
And goodbye to Yendamu people. I think we have to give them a special goodbye.
Yeah, great to hear from you, Ros, and all your Yendamu crew. Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye everybody.